is the Canon EOS R3 Mark II being quietly tested, as we originally reported, at the Milan Winter Olympics? A known source says yes. The Canon R3 Mark II has a dual native resolution sensor tested at the Milan Winter Olympics, stating that the camera's not positioning itself as just a high-resolution version of the EOS R1. Instead, it's more of an experimental beast, packing the industry's first dual native resolution backside illuminated stacked sensor as its biggest innovation. It also reports to have a new autofocus system more advanced than the Canon EOS R1. Does it have 9K RAW? Click subscribe and we'll get right to it. Thanks so much for subscribing. It really does encourage me to do better. Hi, I'm Simon and welcome to my channel. I love to cover the camera news and rumor sites, patent applications, and product briefs along with pro forums to better forecast where the market's heading. And tonight, well, thanks to a viewer, I just received information of an alleged leak from Camera Beta, a Chinese Weibo account. The new machine supports switching between two native resolutions of 54 megapixels and 24 megapixels, and realizes a high-speed continuous burst shooting of 40 frames per second in 54 megapixels and 90 frames per second at 24 megapixels. Two native resolutions. Now on the high side, 54 megapixels is 9 megapixels more than, well, I've got in my Canon EOS R5 Mark II. And 24 is that sweet spot that so many sports and wildlife photographers prefer, giving them superior low light performance. So you might be wondering what it means to have two native resolutions in one camera with a single sensor. Well, perhaps this helps. It adopts an enhanced Bayer array, which combines adjacent pixels in 24 megapixel mode, increasing the sensitivity by 80% compared to the EOS R3. Combined with triple base ISO, it achieves top-level, high-sensitivity performance. So what this tells us is that the sensor is actually a 54 megapixel sensor, but in order to significantly improve the low-light sensitivity, it sacrifices that 54 megapixels for sensitivity. Now that would work very well indeed, if it can deliver more low-light performance than the Canon EOS R1 at 24 megapixels. That would be a huge win, a really big win for sports and wildlife photographers. At 54 megapixels, it would give more resolution than the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. A camera, as Canon has said, the 5 series is all about high resolution, and the R1 is all about low light sensitivity. The R3, it looks like, would be beating not only the R5 in high resolution, but perhaps the R1 in low light sensitivity. It's not going to be launched as a high-resolution version of the EOS R1, but a more experimental product. The core innovation lies in the industry's first dual-native, backside illuminated stacked sensor. Now this does make a lot more sense now. The Olympics is the best place to test cameras such as the R1, the R3. This is where they live. If the alleged specs are real, well, it means that Canon is using the Olympics to test a whole new camera, a whole new type of sensor, to see if their engineering designs are working as well they were designed. And if they fail, well, no biggie, back to the drawing board. They haven't announced anything. They're just testing this debadged camera. But if they work, well then get ready for a huge leap in low light sensitivity. And sure, we're going to 54 megapixels. That's kind of nice, it's cute, and it's a little bit more than the R5 Mark II. But when it comes to this level at this part of the game, increasing low light sensitivity matters a lot. In fact, I was just recently at the 2026 Canadian International Auto Show, and I was shooting with a Canon R5 Mark II along with a 50mm, yes, it was the 50mm, the f1.4 VCM. And as you can see, it did a terrific job. And if it wasn't for YouTube, you'd actually see some noise. I'm going to cover off the rest of the specifications, then I'll go through my reality check and let you know my feelings about this, whether we're being punked and somebody's leading us with a set of alleged leaked specs, or if this is actually something coming from the Olympics. As again, we had previously reported that there were rumors that an EOS R3 Mark II was being tested and that it was going to be something different. So what are the other specifications? Well, we already talked about it having dual native resolution, a backside illuminated stacked sensor. And it's not going to be a high-res version of the R1. We've got 54 megapixels, 24 megapixels, and it's going to have triple base ISO. Now, in terms of the frame rate, 40 frames per second at 54 megapixels and 90 frames per second at 24 megapixels. Now, this is the next big thing. The autofocus system, it's new, but it's not new. We've seen it in the patent applications before, but this type of autofocus system is going to use quad pixel autofocus with four photodiodes per pixel. Now that's in the 24 megapixel mode. Now the R1 has phase detection, or the R1's autofocus phase detect autofocus system has both horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. And this camera is going to get the same thing. Now in terms of video, now this is interesting. This is the highest we've seen on any hybrid mirrorless camera to date, other than, I know, yes, Blackmagic. This camera is going to be capable of, this is not just a photo-centric camera. It's going to be able to do 90K, not 90K, sorry, scratch that, 9K at 60 frames per second. 90K, I was combining 9 and 60, but 9K at 60 frames per second, and that's RAW. It can also do 6K at 120 frames per second RAW, and it maintains full pixel autofocus. And please forgive me because this is translated, machine translated from Chinese to English. My wife, who's Chinese, is not at home right now, so I'm having to use the machines instead of a real person. So there is some language there that is a little bit hard to understand, but I've gone over it several times, and I gotta say that this doesn't have any of the normal red flags that I would expect. Now, the first time I went through it, I spotted two, but that was translation-related errors. When I went through and translated it using multiple different sources and looking at it different ways and reading over it, I realized that there weren't any red flags here at all. That this is an experimental camera. Sure. Now, what does experimental mean? Are they experimenting with a brand new camera at the Olympics that, if it tests well, will come out sometime later this year? Perhaps. Is it completely an experimental camera where they're testing new technologies and it's the new technologies that they're testing? Perhaps. But the fact that they're calling this the R3 Mark II leads me to believe that this, if successful, is going to show up in the Canon EOS R3 Mark II. This is very interesting to me because, again, we've got that segmentation that Canon has. The R5 Mark II sells for around, well, $38.99, just shy of its release price of $42.99. And the Canon EOS R1, it sells for $62.99, at least until it got a price increase, and it's now closer to $7,000. So the R3 Mark II, when it released, was $6,000, $59.99. If it's going to have a higher resolution than the R5 Mark II, and I'm sure it's going to have Canon Log 2, Canon Log 3, and all the other stuff, waveforms and all that, then I can understand it costing more than, well, the R5 Mark II or the 5 series, giving it that, well, 6,000 plateau mark. But if it's going to have low light sensitivity better than the R1 with 24 and 54 megapixels, what's the point of the R1? Now, Canon could do something here and say, okay, one CF Express Type B card slot and one SD card slot. That would certainly force a lot of pros into the R1 over the R3. So I guess the only red flag here is calling it the R3 Mark II, but having a better low light sensitivity than the R1 and a higher resolution than the R5 just has me kind of wondering, again, how does this make sense getting it the R3 badge if it's better than both? And then it should cost more, right? So there are a few things here that still, when you understand Canon's lineup, don't make a whole lot of sense. But in terms of everything coming together, yeah, if this is being faked, it's coming from somebody that knows Canon very well and might even be a pro photographer themselves. But again, we've heard other stuff, rumblings in the past, where we were told that the R3 Mark II is coming out this year, that it could be tested at the 2026 Winter Olympics. And I even had a source telling me that, I'm just going to throw this out there now, I didn't release this before because there was no other information to go along with it, but they had seen a poster and it had the R3 Mark II on it. So, as far as probability, plausibility of this being real, I'm going to chalk it up there as being, at least from a technology standpoint, 70-30. I think it makes an awful lot of sense. But again, calling it the R3 Mark II and all that badging, it just doesn't jive. Yes, it's higher than the R5 Mark II, but the R3 Mark II and the R1, it's messy. Have you overheard anything regarding the specifications of the Canon EOS R3 Mark II? Anything that you can share with me and my audience that might help clarify some of these concerns that we have? Well, if so, please email me at simondyates@gmail.com so I can share it with my viewers. And if you would like to support this channel, and if we do have pre-orders for the R3 Mark II coming up, then please consider using my affiliate links down below for B&H and Adorama in the United States, Wax Photo and Video in the United Kingdom, and Photocog for the rest of Europe. Now, fingers crossed that the engineers have, got everything in the chips inside the camera and everything's testing it well, because increasing low light performance is a big deal. And if that comes out in the R3 Mark II, you can bet it's going to be in the R1 Mark II. You can bet it's going to be in the R5 Mark III, and it's going to come down the line. I don't think it's going to trickle down much lower than the R6, but improving low light performance, well, it matters. It really matters, and that's a big deal. So thank you so much for watching. And by the way, it is late here right now when this information came in. I'm going to go up and edit it. I don't know if it's going to come out at its regular time at 3 o'clock in the morning or a little earlier. This is kind of big news. When I first read it, I thought, let's see. But as I've gone over it a few times, this is kind of big breaking news, so I'm going to get it out there before anybody else. Anyhow, thanks so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day, a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye-bye now.